Hello again, Struck. Welcome back. Today I'm bringing you another What the Struck is video, and this one is dedicated to Circus Electrique. I haven't done a What the Struck is video since Farthest Frontier, since like a month ago, and I finally found a game that gets me excited enough to want to make a What the Struck is video, a game that I think is worth of a What the Struck is video. Impressions of me after playing the game for a few hours. Keep in mind, I haven't unlocked two mechanics. I'll mention those later on in the game, what they are from the codex of the game. Thankfully, I've learned about them. But overall, I've played enough to know the majority of things that need to be known before I can judge the game. So I hope you enjoyed this. Buckle up and let's go. Begin with a quick summary of the game and its main story, what drives the game throughout. Circus Electrique, turn-based, tactical, with RPG elements, with circus management, steampunk, dark, and overall very well looking and feeling when you play the game. The story is you are Amelia, and your mother has been a beast tamer of a sort. She has a lion, which is now your lion. There has been an accident some time ago that happened in a circus, and your uncle is now a circus manager, and he somehow was there when the accident happened with your mother. And the world, the world, London, where which is the world in the game. Has been popular when it comes to circus, and you have the circus of your uncle and the circus of some guy, EY. I'm not gonna say the whole name, etc. I don't want to spoil too much, but this EY guy used to work with your uncle for P.T. Barnum. He used to be P.T. Barnum's assistant. Your uncle used to be the assistant of the assistant, and now this guy has made a lot of puppets, robots, mechanical things everywhere throughout the world in the game. So cops that are puppets, so circus performers that are puppets, and so on. And Emilia wants to interview him and get to him, and she's on her quest to do so. But things happen on the way. Without spoiling too much, I'll stop here. The battle in the game, the battle system. There are a lot of things worth mentioning, but it's, as I mentioned, turn-based battle. You have 4 people on one side, up to 4 people on the other side, similar to Darkest Dungeon, Iratus Word of the Damned, and other games like that. And you have the position system and movement. So characters can move forward, backwards. There's 4 positions, position 1, 2, 3, 4. Certain characters prefer to be on certain positions. Certain skills require you to be on positions A, B, C, or D. Or a mixture of those, and they can only target enemy slots 1, 2, 3, and 4, or a mixture of those, and that's kind of how it goes. That type of combat to expect. Using skills, each character has different skills. Later on, I'll talk about how you can upgrade them, but characters can use one skill every turn, and I've noticed that some consumables, I'm not sure about whether it's all consumables, but some consumables don't consume your skill, and you can use a consumable and then use a skill in the same turn. There is a devotion system, and devotion is kind of like fear, like sanity and morale in other similar games, which is like a second type of HP bar, and you can either choose to attack the HP bar, the actual HP bar, or to attack the devotion bar of a team. But there's more to this. There's more depth to devotion. When you have higher devotion, each character, based on the type of class, there's 15 classes, gets a different buff when the devotion is maxed out at 100. But if the devotion reaches 0, the character flees. If it's an enemy, they flee the battle. If it's your character, they flee, but they don't die. And if it's a boss fight, there would be some cases, especially the big act bosses, where getting them to 0 devotion won't make them flee. But Devotion is a nice additional layer to give you some diversity of how you build your team, your squad. What else can we say about them? Oh, there's also skills that are tied to devotion, as I mentioned. Some skills could increase devotion temporarily, permanently. Some skills would reduce devotion permanently or temporarily. Overall, it's definitely a nice extra layer. So, if the last opponent left behind has their devotion very low, they would also flee without it needing to reach 0. So keep that in mind. But they will also start to rage if they have high devotion, which makes their attacks more powerful. So that's something to keep in mind. There's also status effects as usual, and there's, I think, poison, fire, electricity, water, I think smoke, but maybe smoke is not an element in the game, and there's physical as well. So there's active status effects and so on, reducing incoming damage, hiding the character from opponents, and other fun skills. And just like there are buffs, there are also debuffs of all types. So each class has one class skill specific to that archetype, and if you're lucky, you might get to roll on that hero, on that performer, with an additional random passive skill, which again is specific to that class, but the other one would be random. So one of them would be the same for all people for that class, while the other one is the additional and it's random. There's guarding, there's waiting, and there's fleeing mechanics. I don't think I need to explain too much about that. But guarding, as you might guess, is keep the turn but get extra protection. Waiting until the end of the turn, and fleeing, well, obviously, to leave battle, to flee safely. There's consumables, as I mentioned. Some of those would be like grenades, like things that increase your devotion, things that increase your HP, things that increase the HP of the whole team. I mean healing, not increasing, not the maximum, just healing. And there's all sorts of things. And there's also consumables that are outside of battle, more about that later. Another thing worth mentioning is the amaze meter. After a certain part of the story, you would unlock a building and where you can learn new ultimates, I like to call them. They're called super skills in the game. You have 3 super skill slots, and each of those slots corresponds to a certain charge level, and each of those slots can have a unique skill. You can't have the same skill in 1, 2, and 3. And what slot you put the skill in decides how strong that skill would be when you use it. So if I put healing on slot 1, it would be 20% healing for the whole team. If I put it on slot 2, it would be 30%. And if I put it on slot 4, I think it was 40%. That might not be the exact numbers. I'm sure about the 20%, not sure about the other numbers. But depending on which slot you put the skill in, it will either get SWAT 1, SWAT 2, or SWAT 3 effects. So charge 1, charge 2, or charge 3 effects of the skill. So you have to make a choice. Which skill do I put as 1, 2, or 3? And based on whether it's 1, 2, 3, again, you need to either charge it up fully if you want to use the 3 skill, or charge just the first stage if you want to use stage 1 skill. Another thing to keep in mind is state of mind effects. They trigger once the character's devotion reaches specific high or low values. If it's very high, you could get some extra damage bonuses or other things, as I mentioned, based on the character, and precision damage and so on. If it's very low, again, you get that negative effect. So keep in mind about that. And each character may enable only one state of mind effect at a time. However, if the devotion value changes greatly, a positive effect can override an active negative effect, and vice versa. And there are certain battle conditions such as daylight, nighttime, fog, crowd, and rain, and so on that affect the fighting for this specific match. Not forever, just for this specific match. For example, during rain, fire damage is lower, but during night it's higher. During the daytime, everything is normal, no special things. Certain fields would be good for devotion fighting, others not, and so on. The daily whoop, as I like to call it in this game, is important, and a very important part which I like to begin with is the circus activities. First of all, your circus has levels. As you perform shows and as you fight, you get circus experience, which is called fame. The more fame you get, the more buildings you can be upgrading, and the more buildings in general show up. So keep in mind that buildings can only be upgraded up to the circus level. So if you have circus level 3 and you want to upgrade your artisan, you can only upgrade it up to artisan level 3. If your circus level is 5, you can upgrade your artisan or workshop or whatever other building up to level 5. So definitely fame, super important part if you want to progress reasonably quickly. As I mentioned, you can upgrade buildings, and this could affect recruitment costs, daily fees, and even the availability of certain character classes. High level train is definitely needed, and if you want to get more classes, if you want to recruit more people for cheaper, yeah, this is definitely a good thing to upgrade the train. But there's, again, every building can be upgraded, and you choose which building is more important to you right now. Again, eventually everything will be maxed out most likely, but that's how it is. There is also crafting in the artisan, as I mentioned, and you find components by performing and getting gifts from the audience, or by encountering certain things in the open map with the exploration mode, as well as drops after fights. As I mentioned, there is inventing and setting super skills. More about that in the combat segment. Before this, I'm not gonna go into detail about that, but upgrading the building, the workshop will make all unlocked skills stronger, and it will also unlock new skills with each level. And sometimes you would have to choose between skill at the top or at the bottom. So you have at levels 2, 4, etc. You have to choose between one out of 2. There is another building called the Oracle. You unlock that eventually, I think around Act 3. The Oracle helps the exploration team in different ways during city traversal and battles, but basically you pay some resources, and for each slotted hero in the Oracle, it gives you 1 extra %, if I'm not mistaken, experience, was it? Oh no, I think it might be precision or dodging. There was a positive combat related buff, if I'm not mistaken, that you get before the fight, and after the fight it gives you 1% devotion regenerated after the fight for each person slotted in there. You can also train performers in the practice tent. You pay, if I'm not mistaken, tools, and then they get experience. I think it was 60 XP or something like that for the day while being assigned there. And random circus attribute may increase at higher building levels as well. The circus show is, as I mentioned, a super important part of you progressing, and it's what I like to do first in my daily whoop. So how does it work? First, you go to the big circus building, circus show, and you pick between some drafts. Later on, more drafts will show up, but you pick certain drafts, and they have 3 different things you have to consider as your income. There's audience satisfaction, there's performance experience, and let me double check exactly what it was again. So yeah, there's audience stars for more revenue and chances of receiving gifts. Entertainment stars is more circus fame and chances of receiving gifts. And complexity stars which are more experience points gained for performers. So each one of those would have a potential of maximum X in each of those 3 categories. Audience, entertainment, and complexity is what I'll call them. So you start by picking that show based on what rewards they yield and how much you can invest into each star. So if the maximum stars are 10, some shows would let you go 5 stars in this, 2 stars in the other one, 3 stars in the other one. Once you reach that limit, you would not be able to put more into that category. But that's why there's different ones with different mixtures, and the higher you progress in the story, the bigger that limit will go for the shows, and the more people would be in the show, which is the draft. Each show would have a draft of X SWATs, and each SWAT would have three things to consider. First, what type of SWAT is it? Is it arrow up, arrow down, arrow left, or arrow right? Each arrow has a different color to make it easier to talk about them. But if that arrow matches the arrow on the character, that's a synergy. Some characters are all stars and they have a star instead of an arrow. That means they can go in any position, be it main event, be it support event, and so on. Then another thing you should consider is sometimes there would be a double bonus if a certain SWAT is occupied by performers of a certain archetype. So a juggler, snake charmer, and so on. Let's say this SWAT gives me 2 times the points, the stats, the show stats, if I have a juggler and a snake charmer. So I would want to put a juggler and a snake charmer there. So we can get fun, amazement, thrill, and laughs of the character doubled. More about those in the character creation. There are also boosters. You can craft boosters, you can find boosters as well. And there's booster SWATs. Each show has between 0 and I'm not sure what the maximum is, maybe 6, I think, boosters that can be used. And you can use actually you can use more than one of the same booster. And each booster gives you X stars of X or Y or whatever category. So keep that in mind. You might end up saving up. And how do you get stars? Well, again, a show has expectations. If you don't meet the expectations, you won't get to the stars section at all, and you won't be able to complete the show. So you need to meet a total of X, Y, Z, fun, amazement, thrill, and WAF. Let's say a certain show requires 50 of each. The total sum of the fun, amazement, thrill, and WAF of my performers needs to be over 50 or over total, so that I can do that. And once we've met those expectations, we can then worry about the stars. The stars, as I mentioned, give you certain things based on how many there are, so I'm not gonna repeat myself, but audience, entertainment, complexity, those are the 3 stars. You get them from chemistry and devotion. Every performer has a preferred performance type, but many are also particular about with whom they like to work. So that's what we call chemistry. So certain performers have green or red symbols of different professions, different archetypes. So let's say I have a strong man that has an affinity, positive affinity with jugglers, but negative affinity with fireblowers. And there's links between those SWATs. So you would want to make sure that his SWAT is linked with the ones that have affinity with him or the ones that he has affinity with. There needs to be at least one for it to go green, otherwise it's gonna remain orange, and if it's a negative one, it's gonna be red and affect negatively the stars. So chemistry bar is for stars, whereas devotion is for again for stars, but it's based on the devotion of the character, so how high the devotion of the performer is. So this needs to be also paid attention to. This needs to be something you consider when deciding who goes on that performance. This is again another important part of the whoop. I normally do that last. I might go into the exploration mode and decide after I've done my show from the remaining ones, which would be the 4 ones I want to use as fighters, and then go back to my circus, finish assigning people to the sleeping tents, to the train, to the oracle, and so on. And then once everything is done, I finish with the exploration. The exploration eventually would lead you to a fight. There is no way for you to completely avoid fights. If you don't avoid fights, you don't progress the day. If you don't do fights, you don't progress the days. After each fight, a new day begins, and you can restart the whoop by starting a new show and assigning people to positions in other buildings. But you assemble a team of up to 4 performers. There are preferred character positions. So on the card of each hero, you would see their preferred positions in green dots or blue dots or whatever underneath them. And there's position 1, 2, and 3 on the SWOTs. You can see which position is what, so you can refer to the preferred positions. And once you decide who goes where, what skills you want to use with them, and so on, there's 6 consumables you can take. Up to 6 consumables. You can take more with you, but in the battle only the 6 swatted would be available. And district activities are nodes, and they're connected with different paths and roads. And there's so many different ones, such as chests for wood drops, such as spin the wheel of fortune, or misfortune if you're unlucky. And there's mystery characters, there's events that unlock hidden paths and shortcuts. There's interviews with your uncle and other useful things. I don't want to spoil too much about that. But bit by bit, you progress to a final destination. The first act makes you go to London Bridge. You have to reach there. And eventually there's a boss battle at the final node with every act. A big boss battle. And finishing that big boss battle would unlock something called King of the District, which is a fight. You can do that fight as much as you want, but there is a catch. You need a golden bar, and you get a golden bar once you finish an act, and you can use it right away, or you can save it for later. But you can also craft it eventually later on when you level up your artisan. I think to level 3 or 4 was it, I can't remember what level it was, but you get to craft golden bars for King of the District fights. Those are champion fights. Yeah, they only unlock for each district after this district has been completed. And if you fail to defeat them, it's fine. You can go again, of course paying the full entry fee each time, but defeated characters will die in this battle, so make sure you really mean to have them fight for you. And there is something called the Quip. I still haven't been in the Quip, but I've seen how you can get those membership. But the Quip is pretty much like a survival mode with waves. You need to craft specific membership cards to enter the Quip. Again, you need that level 4, I think, artisan or whatever it was. And series consecutive battles where the fight goes on until every controlled performer is defeated. Characters cannot be healed between the rounds, but don't worry, performers defeated in Quip battles won't leave your circus. Earn special rewards for completing certain number of rounds and try your best to reach the end. If there is an end, what the game says. And maybe the Quip is where you get time capsules. Time capsules are something interesting. It allows you to re-enter a region that you have already done. And to explore it in a different way if you feel like it, which could unlock new idols, special characters, more about that later. Or just in general to experience this region, this district in a different way from the first one you did. And this brings us to the city map with the districts. You see, this is District 1 here, and that's the King of the Hill for District 1, District 2, and then the King of the Hill for District 2, eventually District 3, and so on. You only have access to this map once you are done with a certain district. Once you start a district, it doesn't seem like you can go back to that map. You have to finish the district before you can get back to that map. But this is how acts are. I consider each district a new act because it progresses the main story. It has a big boss at the end, so it's the equivalent of acts. Now, character management. Each character levels up once they reach a certain amount of experience from fighting, training, or performing, regardless of where. And they get all of their basic stats boosted, or if not all, specific ones that do get boosted, increased, like damage, HP, and so on. But they also get 10 points that they can spend on performance stats, such as laugh, and what were the other ones? Just a moment. So they are the ones that are needed for show expectations. Fun, amazement, thrill, and laugh. Fun, amazement, thrill, and laugh are the ones you get 10 points to spend however you choose in those 4 categories every level up. The devotion can be increased in many ways, but for healing the devotion, as I like to call it, Kowa is good during battle. There are friendly character skills that can do it, like the belly dancing for the snake charmer. There's district notes that can reward or reduce your devotion, and defeating multiple opponents simultaneously with one attack also gives some devotion. Forcing enemies to flee also gives devotion, and in general taking part in circus shows is a great increase of that. Losing performers, when their devotion value is 0, they flee. If the devotion is 0 for multiple days, they just leave the circus. So make sure that you keep the devotion of a character well rested, let's say. Resting because you can leave them in the tent, in the sleeping tent, and they would sleep and heal HP and regenerate some devotion. They also die in battle. Many battles, if they die completely from HP loss rather than devotion loss, they leave the circus permanently. If their devotion reaches 0, they flee the fight and then they can return in the next one, as long as you don't get defeated, obviously. Then gadgets are like artifacts, items. Each character has 2 slots, so which artifacts you equip depends on you. I personally, for example, really like the synergy between the skill, the spine breaker skill of the strongman that reduces the spine breaker's accuracy. Precision is called in the game, and I like an item that gives me precision so I can use that without the negative effect. There's other good things you can synergize, so basically choose your gadgets wisely, place them. If you only have 2 slots per character, you really need to make some tough choices. The last few things I want to talk about are the daily activities. There is a newspaper, which is pretty much a summary at the end of each day after the fight is done. And that sums up what happened, the performers and so on. I don't want to go into details about it, but again, it's gonna pretty much summarize everything that has happened based on what choices you made and have done. There is the daily routine, as I mentioned, which I like to start with the circus show, then assigning performers to buildings and so on, to make sure they don't get bored and they don't starve and so on. And then moving on to exploration and fighting. Pretty interesting. The next thing you would be seeing on the screen would be the pros and cons. And to preserve time, I won't talk. I would just leave the text on the screen for a few seconds. You can pause and read them. But to make the video short enough, I do not want to go into much detail about those pros and cons. To get notified when I upload more content like this one or other builds and guides for Wooter and not so Wooter games, you can subscribe to my channel and hit that bell button to not miss out on notifications. As well as keep in mind there's something called memberships on YouTube, which lets you be a paying member for my channel to get access to perks such as emotes and badges made by me, as well as the option to get one-on-one tutoring for the very basics of Adobe Photoshop, Premiere and After Effects. And memberships can be cancelled at any time if you no longer want to be a member. Thanks for watching all the way until the end. Struck up, keep it cool until next time, and goodbye.